0 to 165 knots in under 3 seconds. That's what a U.S. Navy fighter pilot absorbs every launch. And over a 6-month carrier deployment, they'll do it roughly 120 times. Add 150 decibel deck noise, sleep in coffin-sized racks, and a psychological breaking point known as the 90-day wall. Most people couldn't survive a week. So how do they endure 6 months? For Lieutenant Ramirez, a typical deployment day begins before sunrise and does not wind down until long after sunset. The carrier's schedule is relentless. Over 182 days at sea, each FA-18 pilot is expected to log around 120 sorties and more than 200 flight hours. During high-intensity periods like the Operation Inherent Resolve surge, the pace spikes to 12 or even 15 launches in a single day. There are no weekends or slow Mondays. Instead, the calendar is measured in flight windows and alert cycles, each one blurring into the next. Ramirez's day often starts at 0200 hours, rolling out of a rack with a few hours sleep, heading straight into a briefing before the first sortie. The tempo is set by the air wing's operational demands and the ship's constant motion. Between launches, there is barely time to grab a meal or catch up on mission planning. Some days, the schedule demands 2 or 3 flights, each one separated by only a handful of hours on deck. Surge windows push the limits even further, stacking back-to-back missions and compressing rest into short, fragmented stretches. By 2100 hours, when most of the crew is winding down, Ramirez is either in a debrief, prepping for the next launch, or squeezing in a few minutes of downtime before the cycle begins again. Multiply this by 6 months, and the numbers tell the story. 120 launches, 200 plus hours in the cockpit, and a daily rhythm that never truly lets up. The cumulative fatigue is not just a side effect, it is built into the job. Each sortie, each hour aloft, adds another layer to the exhaustion that every pilot carries day after day until the deployment ends. Nguyen stands at the edge of the flight deck, helmet sealed, eyes fixed on the green catapult light. The EMALS system surges beneath the Super Hornet, silent at first, then a rising hum. In less than 3 seconds, the jet leaps from 0 to 165 knots, 3 times the force of gravity slamming Nguyen back in the seat. The cockpit rattles, harness biting into shoulders, the horizon blurs. For a heartbeat, the only sound is the roar of engines and the jolt of the deck dropping away. Ramirez, waiting in the ready room, describes it as being fired out of a cannon with no warning. You brace, he says, but it still hits you every time. Night launches amplify the violence. The carrier's deck is a patchwork of red and blue, shadows flickering as the jet vanishes into black sky. Nguyen's knuckles whiten on the stick. The body's adrenaline spikes, but the mind has to stay sharp. One mistake in these seconds, and the mission ends before it begins. Recovery is no gentler. After hours in the air, pilots line up for the trap. The arresting gear waits, a 40-foot steel cable stretched across the deck. The FA-18 slams down at 150 knots. In 18 seconds, the aircraft is wrenched from flight to a dead stop, chest harnesses digging in, neck straining against the helmet. Miss the wire, and the jet surges back into the night for another attempt. A bolter. Night traps push every nerve. The miswire rate climbs after sunset, and every pilot knows the odds. Deck noise peaks at 150 decibels during these cycles, a sound that vibrates through steel and bone. Even with double hearing protection, the launch and trap leave ears ringing and nerves raw. Nguyen's post-flight brief is short and direct. You walk off the deck still shaking. The adrenaline fades, but the noise follows you below. For pilots, the shock of launch and recovery is never routine. It's a physical jolt that lingers long after the engines cool, echoing through the narrow racks and restless sleep that come next. Below the flight deck, Sleep is a negotiation with noise and steel. Berthing for fighter pilots means sliding into a rack barely 6 feet long, stacked 3 high, with just enough space to turn on your side. The curtain offers little privacy, and the air feels thick, close to the hull, just inches above the waterline. In these compartments, the density reaches 4.2 people per square meter, with bodies and gear packed tight enough that every movement is a shared event. Ramirez describes the sensation as waking inside a metal box, the ceiling close enough to brush his knuckles. The hum of the ship is constant, but it's the launches that define the night. Each catapult cycle sends a shock wave through the bulkheads, spiking sound levels to 120, sometimes 130 decibels. Even with earplugs and over-ear muffs, the thunder rolls through the mattress and rattles the frame. Sleep comes in fragments, 20 minutes here, an hour there, broken by the next launch or a sudden call to brief. The schedule offers little mercy. Sleep windows are carved out between 0200 and 0600, or in the evening from 1900 to 2300, but they rarely last. When the flight deck is active, the entire compartment vibrates with the force of a jet being hurled into the dark. Some pilots try to nap during lulls, but even then, the anticipation of the next launch keeps muscles tense and minds half awake. Fatigue builds in layers. The body adapts, but the mind never fully lets go. Every missed hour accumulates, and over weeks, the grind becomes physical, a slow drain that seeps into reaction time and decision-making. Ramirez admits, "You get used to waking up tired. After a while, you forget what real rest feels like." In this world, sleep is a resource as scarce as silence, and every pilot learns to survive on less than they ever thought possible. The ship's galley runs like a well-oiled machine, churning out more than 3,500 meals every hour to keep the crew fueled. For pilots like Diaz, each meal isn't just a break, it's a necessity. High-G maneuvers can burn through 4,000 calories in a single day, and every tray is loaded with dense proteins, carbs, and hydration packs. On a normal week, the menu rotates between eggs, pasta, and chicken. But as days at sea stretch on, fresh produce and meats disappear. During one 47-day stretch without a single resupply, Diaz remembers the shift. No fresh meat, no greens, just canned and freeze-dried rations. The galley staff compensates with vitamin packs and protein bars, but morale dips when the salad bar turns into a memory. The support doesn't end in the mess. Before deployment, every pilot completes 3 weeks of SEER training: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Cole describes the experience as a mental crucible, learning to evade capture, resist interrogation, and survive with nothing but a knife and a radio. The lessons are harsh, but they stick. Once aboard, pilots spend 2 to 3 hours each week in the simulator, rehearsing emergency landings, night recoveries, and missile evasions. The tort system throws every scenario imaginable at them, from electronic jamming to hydraulic failure. For Cole, the sim isn't just a drill, it's a lifeline, a place to fail safely before facing the real thing. Ramirez, watching a new class cycle through SEER and the simulator, knows these routines are more than checklists. They're the invisible scaffolding that holds up every mission. When fatigue sets in and the days blur together, it's the training and the meal line that keep pilots sharp, even as the comforts of home drift further out of reach. Day 90 arrives without warning. Ramirez wakes up groggy, his mind dulled by weeks of broken sleep and the endless churn of launches and landings. The numbers catch up fast. Psychomotor tests, once routine, now show a 12% drop in reaction time compared to the start of deployment. It's not just fatigue. Flight surgeons track cortisol, the stress hormone, and by this point levels have spiked nearly 30% above baseline. The body adapts, but the edge blunts. Even simple decisions feel heavier. In the ready room, Ramirez catches himself hesitating on checklists he could once recite in his sleep. The glamour of the first month is gone. Now every sortie is about endurance, pushing through the wall, holding focus as the days blend and the nerves fray. The countdown to home feels distant, and the only way forward is to keep moving, one launch at a time. The carrier's deck fades to near black, barely half a lux of light marking the landing area. Wind and sea push the ship through a 5-degree pitch, the bow rising and falling beneath the night sky. Ramirez steadies his approach, eyes locked on the faint glow of the Fresnel lens. There's no room for hesitation when Nguyen's voice crackles over the radio. 3 seconds to commit. Ramirez has to decide, land or wave off. At this speed, the window closes fast. The aircraft aligns, hook down, and in those final moments, all training and muscle memory take over. Wheels slam onto steel, the arresting cable snaps tight, and the Super Hornet shudders to a halt. For a heartbeat, only the sound of engines and the pounding of Ramirez's heart fill the darkness. Then, relief floods in. Another night trap survived. Another mission complete. Every hour, U.S. carrier pilots operate on the edge, sustaining performance where mistakes mean lives. As global tensions put more strike groups to sea, the human limits they face become national priorities. Survival isn't just about the cockpit. It's about enduring together. What do you think it takes to last out there?